Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike. Today's guest on the podcast is Charlie Kirchofer. He is a repeat guest and was on the podcast in episode 133 when we discussed his purchasing a new-to-him sailboat and then hiring a captain to help him bring the boat back from Annapolis, where he purchased it, to his home port of Boston. In this episode, Charlie and I discussed his first season on the boat, the adventures he went on, the trips he took, and the lessons he learned.
Bela, it's always great from my side to get updates from our previous guests. And Charlie was a great guest. So listeners, I think, will appreciate hearing about Charlie's evolution as a sailor and a boat owner, because that's always an interesting story, I think. And listeners should especially kind of listen for a discussion on about a topic about how anxiety can often go hand in hand with sailing, especially for people who've learned how to sail later in life, and explore some strategies on working with those anxieties to make sailing a bit more relaxing.
Yeah, those are some great observations, Mike. So let's jump right into my conversation with Charlie. Charlie, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Bela. Great to see you.
Yeah, so Charlie, last episode was great. So you were on, for our listeners, you were on the podcast in episode 133 because last fall, I'm going to put that in the fall of 2024, you purchased your first boat, and you then in the sprint down in the Chesapeake Bay, if I remember correctly.
Annapolis,
Annapolis, and you live in Boston. And then in the spring of 2025, you hired a captain to help you bring the boat up to Boston. And we did an episode about that, which was episode 133, which was great. And now I thought we'd talk a little bit about your first summer on the boat, sort of how that went. What were the surprises? What were the boring things? What were the fun things? What were the anxiety causing things? So wherever you want to start is fine by me, Charlie.
Yeah, and it's good you bring up anxiety. I like to talk about it, I think, because it helps probably other people, I hope. I feel like I'm surrounded by people who don't have a lot of anxiety about sailing because they've been sailing since they were 4, They're like, oh yeah, my dad used to take me out and we went sailing. And so I'm at a yacht club, right? It's full of people who appear to me to have no fear, right? And so I feel like, but I do hear things about people having anxiety. So, I'll talk about that a little bit and the cruising and the cool stuff, but how it was always connected with that. Like, people saw posts I put on Instagram and Facebook I had some gorgeous sunrises and some nice time offshore, and people are like, oh, that looks amazing. And I'm thinking, yeah, I was really scared when I was taking that photo. Or like, I was really anxious about this, or I wasn't sure what was going to happen that day. So that's the part you don't necessarily see. And I'm trying to, you have this pressure to be a real sailor, and which means putting your sails up, trimming, reefing, getting out there, right? And I also have this conflicting feeling of, maybe you just sell the boat and stay on land so you don't have to deal with any of these fears. And trying not to give into either of those extremes, because I think they're both wrong. So, so I start off conservatively, but I'm willing to push myself a little bit and ask myself, hey, is this just a feeling, or is there anything that I can think of mentally here that could be a real issue, or am I just being a little overly anxious about this? And I try to separate those two.
Well, whenever we do something new, I don't care what it is, whether it be sailing or going skiing for the first time or going skydiving for the first time, or something much more pedestrian, like, I don't know, going to a new city for the first time. There's always an anxiety, right? And I think different people deal with it. And certainly, I have what I have coined as anchor anxiety. So whenever I'm out at anchor, I never sleep. It doesn't matter.
And I even have mooring anxiety, Bela, but I'll tell you about that. I have a story about that. So
yeah, the only time I don't have anchor anxiety or a little bit of mooring anxiety is when I'm on someone else's boat. Then I tend to sleep much better. So there's the other interesting difference, right? You're on someone else's boat and they're sort of the captain, they're responsible, and I'm delegating a lot of those things to them versus you're on your own boat. Now you're the captain, you're the one responsible, you're responsible for the people with you, etc. So I think it's perfectly natural to have those anxieties.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, let's peel that onion back a little bit more and talk more about it, Charlie.
Yeah, so I'll just start with our first. We got the boat in May. We got the boat up to Boston in May,
Yes.
and I would say the first, we felt great. 4-day delivery, night and day on the boat. I thought, like, yeah, after doing this, I should be able to do anything else. Our hired captain leaves, and I'm thinking, what? Just me? So, we did some slow, it's a beautiful day. It's calm. Let's go sail. And, we had a couple of really nice sailing experiences in sunny days. Let me try to get the sun out of here a little bit. And I think that made a big difference, right? You go out on a day with 10 knots of wind or less, and, you get to the point where you're like, oh, this is kind of boring. I wish there were more wind, right? And that's a good place to start. You start conservatively and you think, gee, I'd like to go faster. I'm going to shake that reef out. This is a little bit boring. I would much prefer to go that way. Much prefer to start off with 2 reefs in the main and figure out I don't need them, than be heeling way over and trying to reef in gusts. So we had some calm conditions in June, right? In May, it can be pretty windy here still. So as it got into June, we had calmer conditions. We had a number of pretty good sails that were relaxing, where things went as they were supposed to. And, I got a little bit more confident, and we were coming up towards our first planned trip to Provincetown, which is across, Massachusetts and Cape Cod Bay. It's about 8 hours from Savin Hill Yacht Club in southern Boston, where we keep the boat. And it's not a difficult passage at all. There's nothing especially difficult as long as the sea state is fine. And the weather for that weekend was rainy on the day that we were going to be in Provincetown. But from a sailing perspective, nothing threatening, if anything, too little wind, But I was still looking at it like, maybe I missed something. Is there anything? And I'm looking at I use the departure planning from Predict Wind, which is really, really cool. It will show you the maps and all the weather models and the ways that you go hour by hour, what you'll experience, the maximum wind, max gusts, all that kind of stuff. And, I'm refreshing it hourly, watching all the things. Everything looks fine, but you just think, yeah, what if there's some stupid thing you missed that you didn't think about, and you get out there and realize, oh no, so, and I was intellectually sure there wasn't, but you never know, right? So we did head out. We actually stopped at a place called George's Island, which is an island in the Harbor Islands. So what we did was, after work, that's about an hour, and it just gets you get to the outer harbor from the inner harbor. So it's a quicker, you're just out of the harbor the next morning in 15 minutes and on your way, and it would get us into Provincetown earlier on Friday, so we could actually have a little more time. So we spent the night on a mooring there. You can rent them in Dockwap. Totally calm. So it was, that was already picking up that mooring. Hey, this is our first night out together. Nice sunset, beautiful sunrise, flat, calm, great. So that was a nice night. I think I slept relatively well, but it was still kind of new, but there was nothing that woke us up, no wind or anything. The next morning we headed out, and we went north around the island instead of south. Both were about equidistant. And I only found out later that there was something I didn't know, which could have been a serious problem. And that was that a water main that ran under the harbor had broken loose of its fittings and risen up to just below the water at low tide. So there was this massive pipe in the water, and they issued warnings about it a couple hours after we left. So had I gone south, we might have smashed into that water main, and that really would have freaked me out, right? But luckily, we went the other way, so it was no problem. Took one of the most amazing sunrise photos I've ever taken of the clouds moving out of the way, and there's a lighthouse with the sun rising behind it, an orange sky with purple clouds. Beautiful. So all of that was uneventful. And then the anxiety kicked in again that night trying to sleep. because and there's a reason I never took the same mooring again in Provincetown for this reason. But I kept in the night, I kept hearing this banging sound. The wind picked up a little bit, and there was this banging noise, and I thought the banging was like the pennant jumping on the cleat. And I thought, God, there's got to be a lot of pressure on that pennant to be making that noise as it moves on the cleat. And it was, you know, our mooring in Boston was brand new. So the rope looks really good. You know, this looked a little bit less new. You know, I'm thinking, is this, and it's not as thick as ours, because ours is a full inch because we have a big bow cleat. You know, so I thought ours was strong and reliable. I was like, is this one as strong? So when I got up the next morning, I finally realized one of the two pennants was slack. And so the noise was actually it getting caught in the wind when the boat turned, and the pickup buoy that was attached to it banging against the hull. So it was just rope hitting the hull. It was no big deal at all. And so I stayed up all night for nothing.
Yeah, but you know, those unexpected or strange noises drive me nuts as well. It's like I gotta chase them down.
Yeah. And I tried to figure it out the next night, like take out some of the slack, tie up a little piece of rope to it. It still didn't quite work, you know, but because it was still banging. We're in the forward cabin. It's banging right next to my head. So even if it's not anxiety inducing, it is definitely annoying. So that was mooring 501. And I always took 502 or 503 after that. I never seen mooring when we went back. So yeah, that was good. And then we returned in pea soup fog.
Oh, wow.
And that was also, it was supposed to clear. It didn't. It cleared in Provincetown. So we're like, all right, let's go. You know, it looks like it's getting better. And we just went and it just closed in around us, right? Radar is good on the boat. And I'd learned how to use it during the crossing, which was good because we did a lot of night sailing. So I was keeping track of targets. I don't remember how I figured it out, but I discovered that we have an AIS receiver, but not a transmitter. So we could see others, but they couldn't see us.
Yes.
And we did have one incident where a sailboat was on a collision course with us going, you know, they were actually sailing. We were motor sailing. They were going 3 knots. It was pretty calm. So it wasn't, you know, I wasn't too worried about it, but I did see they were on collision course with us. And I called them and said, we don't have an AIS transmitter, so you can't see us, but we see you, you're on a collision course. And they said, we see you on an AIS, maintain course, we'll change course. And I thought, well, maybe we do have a transmitter, or maybe they mean radar. That's kind of confusing. And there was another boat parallel to us, and I didn't think about that at the time. They weren't on a collision course. So then about 100 feet away, they come out of the fog. And they suddenly change course because they see us. And I realized they thought we were the other boat that was parallel to us.
Yes.
That was farther away. And they had no idea we were there. It was fine. Again, they're moving very slowly, so it wasn't a big deal. But that affirmed, like, okay, I don't think they saw us. I later saw my friend bringing his boat down to Provincetown and just confirmed, hey, can you see us? And he said, no, we don't see you.
You know, that's one of the things I love about AIS versus radar is that, at least on my AIS, it tells me the name of the other boat.
Yeah.
And I broadcast the name of my boat. So I can call them by name and I can say, do you see Paradox? Because that's who I am. Right.
Yeah.
Because in radar, before I had AIS, I often made that error in assuming that it was this one. No, but it's the other one, and you know.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know why someone would order. You know, the expense of getting AIS, I think, is the big bulk. Getting one that transmits, I think, is only a little bit more. I don't know why you get only receiver, but
yeah, that's typically a pretty easy upgrade. If you're going to unplug the old one, plug the new one in, fundamentally, is my guess.
Yeah, I bet you have to buy a whole new one. So it's not, what would have been a couple $100 price difference is now a couple $1,000 for a new unit.
No, I think I paid like $600 or $700 for mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's definitely something to consider, because it's great. AIS is really amazing.
Yes.
And radar will pick up navigation buoys. It's really quite astonishing as well. And so I was tracking radar targets that whole time. And here's where mental fatigue sets in. 6 or 7 hours into doing that, we went up. We were doing something at the mast. Maybe we had dropped the sail and were putting it in the sail bag or something because there was no wind. And then all of a sudden we heard this loud roaring engine, and the high-speed ferry from Boston to Provincetown swept out of the fog 100 feet to starboard of us going 40 knots. Now, hopefully they had seen us on radar because they didn't see us on AIS. And I, at the speed they're traveling, I got the radar, I think, set to 3 miles. You only have a few minutes of tracking that movement to recognize it. And in that time, I wasn't paying attention, or I got complacent. So that was a little alarming. So, there are the things that I was not nervous about that were a potential issue, and the stuff that I was worried about that weren't an issue at all.
Yeah. Yeah. We have one of those high-speed ferry boats on Narragansett Bay that runs between Providence and basically Newport. And they go fast. They go 25, 27 knots. And man, they show up and they show up all of a sudden. Whoa, where'd you come from? But they're pretty, at least the ones in Narragansett Bay are pretty used to dealing with sailors who don't know what they're doing, or motorists in general who don't, or boaters in general who don't know what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know sailboats allegedly don't necessarily show up that well on radar. But I think if I can see a navigation buoy, they ought to be able to see a 38-foot sailboat with pretty high freeboard. So hopefully they saw me.
Well, navigation buoys are actually designed to reflect radar signals back.
Fair. Yeah.
So the problem with fiberglass doesn't do a very good job in reflecting signals. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes you see people with these funny shaped, shiny things up halfway up their mast, or 3/4 of the way up their mast. That's a radar reflector.
Yeah.
That's explicitly for that reason. And there's a couple different types, and a lot of people have those on their boats just for that reason.
Yeah, I read into them. A lot of them apparently don't do much. The ones that are like a cylinder barely help at all. The balls, I think, are a little bit better. I guess the active ones are the best, which send out a radar signal. Now, that makes me wonder if you have your radar on, if that makes you more visible. I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know about that. Yeah. But in any case, we didn't get run over. And when we got to Boston Harbor was no fog. So we just came out of the fog, and it was this hot, sunny day. And it was just like, wow, it felt like we just arrived from space, we had been in this white void for 7 hours, and then suddenly emerged into Boston Harbor. So great trip overall. Some unreasonable anxieties, I guess, but figuring out what noises are normal on your boat is part of that, right? Of getting used to it. Figuring out which water sounds are outside in the hull and which ones are a leak inside your boat is another important one, right? But I wasn't worried about that one because I didn't hear I never heard the pump go on, right? So that's something that would have woken me up.
So speaking of pumps, so on one of my trips I took actually on a sail from Florida up to New England, we were motoring. There was no wind. And the person we checked the bilge, and we looked down at the bilge, and the bilge was halfway full of water. I'm going, oh my God, what's going on? First thing I did was I stuck my finger in the water and tasted it.
Yep.
So it wasn't salt water. So I said, okay, we're not sinking. And it turns out that a hose, we had left the water pump on for the water, the faucets. We left the pump on, and a hose blew off one of the fittings. So the pump was running all the time. And the bilge pump turned on. And the bilge pump, leaves like 6 or 8 inches of water in this particular boat's bilge. So it doesn't kind of pump it out dry. So that's how we knew there was water in there.
Right.
But when the bilge pump turned on, since the motor was running, the engine was running, we couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
So my friend whose boat it was has since installed a bilge alarm that if the bilge pump goes on in the cockpit, a little buzzer goes off so you can hear it. And I noticed that when I bought my boat, it comes with that feature that if the bilge pump turns on, you're gonna get a little buzz in the cockpit so you can hear it.
Oh, that's handy. Yeah, that's good. And by the way, through hulls and seacocks are priority, or like anxiety number one for me, I guess.
Yes.
And I want to, this year I'm gonna either get a friend, a knowledgeable friend, or pay somebody to go through the whole boat and look at them, because I know I've read about what to look for, especially looking for pink, right? You scrape it and look for any pink. That means there's dezincification of the bronze or brass, or sometimes the seacocks are brass put in a bronze through hull.
Right.
So I theoretically know what to look for, but I haven't done it, and I'm slightly colorblind, so I'm not confident I'll pick up a bit of pink. So I want somebody to go through and just be like, this one's fine, you're good here. This needs a bit of grease. This one you should replace, right? So
Yes.
that I feel comfortable next year, that I don't have any problems. Because that brings another point. Listening to your podcast, I think there are a couple of philosophies about seacocks. So you've got I think perhaps because you leave your boat pretty far away, you close all of them when you go.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
The broker and the delivery skipper, he was like, I've seen more engines destroyed by people forgetting to open them than I've seen boats sink. If you properly maintain your through hulls and seacocks, you don't have to worry about it. Leave them open. So I have been leaving them open. And then, this other guy who works on boats talked about closing them all the time. So I'm thinking, it's hard to go through and close every single one. I think I'm in the just make sure they're properly maintained and the hoses and the clamps all look good camp, and accept that occasionally something could happen, because I do think I will forget to open them before. And I don't have a key. I can't hang the key on the seacock for the engine, right? Push button.
Okay.
So you could easily forget unless you have, I guess you could hang the key on the battery isolator, because I turned that off. Not the key, there's no key, but I could put a note on it. But what if the note falls off, right? So, plus there's just so many to remember. And that's why you guys need a long time to get started. I think I can arrive on the boat and be underway in 5 minutes. I just kind of I turn on the electronics, I turn on the nav system, start the engine, drop the, make sure the water's flowing out of the exhaust, and we're good to go.
I also think there's sort of, in my mind, a difference between springing a leak on your boat when I'm at a dock and I'm plugged in to shore power. My batteries are not going to get drained down. That pump will keep pumping until the pump craps out. And chances are, someone might notice, hey, this thing's been pumping water coming out the side for a while, versus being on a mooring or being where if the pump turns on, you got maybe 4 or 5 hours, I don't know, 6, maybe half a day, and then you're out of battery juice.
Yep.
Right. So I think that's another sort of factor that I think about in that equation. But I'm at a dock, I'm plugged in, I still close all my seacocks.
Yeah.
And I have a
I'm in the morning and I don't.
yeah, I have a key, and on that key it says open all. And since I close them all, nothing works on the boat. I can't turn the sink on. Right. I close all my drains, the sink drains and everything. Right. So that's sort of a good reminder, because oftentimes I go to the boat and I get there in an evening and I stay there all night long. And it's the next morning I power up and leave. But I know to open the stuff, because after a while I turn the kitchen sink on and the drain plugs up. I go, oh yeah, I forgot to open the seacock. So
yeah.
And interesting enough, all of my seacocks, except for my forward sink, and for the head and the forward head, all of the seacocks are in one place. So they're all under one floorboard, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seacocks there.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Mine are all over the place.
Yeah.
There's one that's accessible by reaching into the shower and way back. There's one that's straight down from there. There's underneath the sink in the head. And there's underneath the kitchen sink. There's at least 2 or 3 in the engine compartment.
Wow.
And I guess that's probably it. They're clustered in, 2 sinks, engine compartment, and like the waste tank. Oh yeah, and then there's a couple in the cockpit locker for the generator, which are very difficult to get to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's also a pain to get to them, to turn them on and off.
Yeah. See, mine are nice and easy. They're at the bottom. They're at the bottom of my companionway, right at the bottom of the stairs. I have one panel there I pick up and boom.
Yeah, if they were all like that, I think I would do it too. That's easy.
Yeah.
Just open it up, turn them on, go to the forward sink, turn that one on, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Interesting.
But no, mine are all over the place. So
Yeah.
which makes it harder to figure out which one is leaking, and slower to turn them off in an emergency too. So
Sure.
it's not great for
Yeah.
that reason as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the more reason to make sure they all look really good before we launch this year. I had them surveyed in Annapolis before we left, so I was fairly comfortable for this year. But for last year, but for the coming season, I know I won't sleep at night if I haven't inspected every single one carefully. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's a big anxiety that I didn't really have during any of these trips. The second trip, we did have an issue with a liquid showing up in a compartment. So I did the engine checks before. I try to do them, especially before a longer trip. Check the oil, and I happened to look down at the top, the ring on the top of the sail drive, and noticed that it had like yellow and red fluid. And I was like, what the heck is that? And so I sent a photo to Frank, and we're trying to get ready to leave, and I had a lot of anxiety because the sea state had been bad, and we were waiting for it to settle down, and I was hoping it was good enough now. And I also discovered a glitch on Predict Wind. The buoys, it says the data is in meters, it's feet. So it was saying 2-meter swells, and I was like, well, that's a lot. It was
Right, that's 6 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, or it was saying 4 meters. I was like, 12-foot waves out there right now. No, they were 4 feet and they settled to 2. But I didn't know that. It says in parentheses meters. It's not. I figured Predict Wind translates the data from feet into meters or whatever. It doesn't. It just takes the National Weather Service data, which I think is natively in feet, or it's displayed in feet in the API or whatever. So it's wrong. So I thought the waves were literally three times as bad as they were. So we waited longer than we probably needed to and went out with no wind again. But yeah, we're getting ready to go. And now I'm like, oh, what is this? And I emailed Francis a photo. I was like, is this normal? And he said, no. Did you wrap your prop around something? He thought I had busted a seal in the sail drive. And I said, this might have been I was like, the pink stuff looks like spilled antifreeze, spilled propylene glycol. And the yellow could have been, the yellowish might be just the oil for the sail drive. And so maybe when I paid someone to service it, they did a sloppy job and I just never noticed. So we mopped it up. I said we didn't hit anything with the prop. Everything sounds normal. We mopped it up and saw if it came back. And it did come back, right? When we ran the engine, it vibrated some down, but it was less and less. So we didn't know for a few days, though, whether there was a problem or not. But eventually it all went away and it didn't keep coming. So we were able to say, okay, my hypothesis that it was a mess that somebody made and didn't clean up properly. And, there might have been a couple of drips somewhere that all ran down there over time.
Right.
That's all it was, and it was clean after that. So that's another thing that can can trigger anxiety. We went back to Provincetown this time for a whole week. So we did Thursday night on the boat at Savin Hill. Friday morning, we departed for Provincetown, met some friends that weekend and stayed the whole week, had a week vacation. And that was good. I still had anxiety about the moorings at night. And I also saw the weather forecast for Thursday. They were predicting 40 knots. So we were going to be not sailing in that, but we were going to be in the mooring field. And Provincetown Harbor wraps, the land wraps all the way around. It looks really well protected, but you still have a mile of fetch. It's a big area, that circle that wraps around. So we already had some fairly rough nights. We had a sailor I knew say like, oh yeah, you guys can't sleep in the forward cabin. It's going to be really bad tonight. That was at the beginning of that week when it wasn't that bad. It was winds in the 20s. It was totally fine. He was, I was like, you jerk, trying to make me scared. It was like, yeah, it was a little wavy or whatever, but it was fine. That made me nervous. Luckily, I talked to the mooring guide, a guy named Malcolm. We now follow each other on social media, and he's this Scottish guy who moved to the U.S. and he does all the moorings for flyers in Provincetown. And he was like, "You're not going to get the mooring pennants parting from a single wind event." He's like, if it were a 3-day nor'easter or something, that's when we might see something like that happen. But those moorings that's not going to happen in a day. And he's like, plus the mooring you're on is actually two 10,000-pound blocks of concrete. So there's no way you're dragging, because they had the old one and they replaced it with a new one that they blocked next to it. They chained them together. So he's like, you've even got extra block there. He's like, you're secure. And and I trusted him. I believed him. I didn't think he was just trying to make me feel better. And so by the end of the week, when that weather came, I had gotten used to it enough that I actually enjoyed it. There was a thunderstorm and I was worried. I'm worried about lightning hitting the boat, of course. There's not a lot you can do about that, so just stay away from metal stuff and stay within the Faraday cage of the rigging. I fell asleep in the afternoon during the thunderstorm.
Well, so there you go.
It was a nice little rain. And so the final 3 days we were there out of the 10, I was relaxed. So it took me almost a week to sort of to decide, okay, it's fine. I can relax and enjoy this. So, week-long vacation. Did you have a nice time? The photos were amazing. And I thought, yeah, I was worried most of it, but yeah, they were nice, right?
Yeah. But you for the first summer on your first boat, sailing from Boston Harbor to Provincetown several times or a couple times and back, and spending a week on a mooring and stuff, that's pretty adventurous for, I think, in the adventurous scale, right? Most people go out for day sails and maybe do one overnight. So I understand the anxiety, but at the same time, you were pretty, I won't use the word aggressive. You were pretty adventurous, I think, from my perspective, on first season on a boat.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I think day sailing is a lot harder. So sailing within Boston Harbor is super stressful. There's traffic, there's things to hit, there are lobster pots everywhere. I learned how much leeway my boat makes when sailing close haul.
Oh, yes.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It has a shoal draft keel. So, we're on port tack, leaning to starboard, and I see pretty far off to starboard a lobster pot and think, well, that's fine. We're going to pass right by that. And then keeps coming closer. And I realize, wow, we're pointed here, but we're going there.
Right.
So getting a sense of that, of knowing I have to look out here. If it's dead ahead, but quite a ways forward, I don't have to worry about that because we're going to go to leeward anyway.
Right.
So I'm constantly looking out for that stuff. When we're out in the open water between Boston and Provincetown, I can relax and enjoy. There's actually lobster pots there too, so you constantly have to keep a lookout. But they're easy. I can always go whichever way. I can always go downwind because I'm not going to hit a shoal.
Right.
Because we're out in the middle of the ocean, so I can avoid those easily. And in and out of Provincetown Harbor is super easy too, and it's deep water. So when I take people for an afternoon sail around Boston Harbor, that's actually the most adventurous and stressful thing.
Yes. Yeah, no, excellent point, because you're absolutely right. Sailing around Narragansett Bay, you got to be paying attention all the time. I remember the first time I went out in Narragansett Bay by myself, solo, I didn't plan ahead, and I didn't make myself a snack or a sandwich for lunch and stuff. And then I realized I can't leave the helm even to run downstairs, I can't do it to make a sandwich because there's just too much traffic around. So it is much night in the ocean. You can you can go down below for a half hour if you want, practically. You know.
Yeah, yeah. During that half hour, that one lobster pot will come up and wrap around your
Yes.
prop. Though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I did another anxiety point, hitting lobster pots. Despite our best efforts, we did hit 2 during the summer, and both of them came loose without an issue. So
Nice.
that was lucky. One of them, I'm not sure what it was hitting. I came up and put it in neutral, and I heard it like knocking along the hull, and it was kind of dragging along. Luckily, it didn't go in the prop, and then it popped out behind us. Okay, thank God. And then another one, I was at the helm, and we were going to miss it, but we were motor sailing. So the sailboat coming the other way actually had the right of way. They were sailing by the look of it. All right, I'll back off the motor. I'll just sail a bit to let them get by. But in doing so, I didn't realize the tide was coming in. So the current dragged us right on top of the lobster pot that we were well clear of. And I tried to react, turn, and made it worse instead of better. And it seemed to wrap right around the rudder. The boat stopped and started to point downwind. I was like, oh no. But I realized I could see a bit of the flag thing sticking out. I got outboard dual rudders. So they're, I know if it's way out here, pretty far from my prop.
Yes.
And I reckoned it probably just got a single wrap around. So I revved up the engine. That's something you got to be careful to do. But I reasoned, okay, it's not in the prop. I revved up the engine, and then I saw it spin. I saw the flag flip around one time, and then it popped out. So we were able to just pull free of it. But God, I hate lobster pots. They really, I hope we can find, I've heard of ones that you can actually hit a code or a radio signal, and they've designed these because they're better for right whales, but they haven't implemented them. And there's like a CO2 cartridge that releases, and then the pot will float to the surface. And so there's no rope attached to it.
Oh, wow.
Those would be really great. I recognize they're more expensive, so it's probably a non-starter with the lobster industry.
Yeah.
But they would certainly make a lot of people's lives easier, because they're, especially starting in June, like the early part of the summer before they got run over by ferries, they were everywhere. I mean, just everywhere, even in 100 feet of water. So that even the first couple of hours on the way to Provincetown, you have to watch out for them too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've interviewed a couple of people who have done considerable sailing up in Maine, and they said it's just it's all over the place, right?
Yeah, it's a reason I don't really want to go to Maine, because it's even worse. It's really, if you get one wrapped around and you got to go in the water and try to free it, and if there's any kind of sea state going on, I mean, it's a thing. I don't want to have to do that. But you may have to. You may be able to call Towboat US. I have read stories of people who called Towboat US and they came and helped them, depending on the situation. But it could be hairy if it's windy or if something else is going on. So
so I carry a swim mask, snorkel,
we do too.
A wetsuit, and a big old knife.
Yeah, we have that stuff too. I just don't want to use it.
I haven't used it, knock on wood, and I don't want to use it.
Yeah. But there you go. There's another one. That's why I haven't, since we arrived, I haven't done any night sailing. Because maybe you can have someone up there on the bow with a light, but that's intense. So doing an overnight sail somewhere.
Yeah, I asked the main sailors that I spoke to, do you go out at night? No, we don't sail at night. You just can't. He said, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? So you just got to plan. You got to plan your adventure around that schedule, or be in deep enough water that you'll be outside of sort of the lobster pots.
Right. Yeah, and there isn't really, Cape Cod Bay is all pretty shallow. I think there are areas, and I've heard of lobster pots being in a couple 100 feet of water up in Maine. So the Maine lobster fishermen put them pretty deep, but I'm pretty familiar. There is an area where there aren't any, and then they show up again when you get really close to Providence.
Yeah.
But some of them are blue floats. Some of them are blue. Some of them are damaged. Some of them are just beneath the surface. So even in the day, you might hit one. So anyway, they're a menace. Absolute menace.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else?
Well, I would say that, so those first 2 trips got through a lot of the beginner anxiety and dealt with a lot of the things that came up. And then we did do 2 more in August, including a trip Labor Day weekend, which was really nice, where we had a bunch of people on the boat at the mooring and going swimming. And that was where I felt like we had the ideal boat life, right? We had people jumping off and swimming and hanging out on the swim platform. And, the only problem we had to deal with was how messy the boat was afterwards. We effectively had a party on board and everything was a mess, but there was there were no more issues there. I wouldn't say I was out of the anxiety, but I definitely, there's always going to be a little nerves. There's a difference between nerves and anxiety, and I think it had moved more into the kind of normal nerves of, for me, the biggest thing is, what's the weather going to be like when we want to come back? Because that's harder to predict in advance. And then, there's things you can do. Worst case, you can leave the boat there,
Right.
and go home and come back for it the next weekend or whatever. Since we're both working, we can't just be like, oh, we'll just leave a day later, because we have to work. You could leave a day earlier and miss the whole weekend, but there's a little bit of that when it's coming up to it, where you have your plan B and C and D, but they're not very nice, right? Or where you need to make a go, no go decision on Thursday already.
Right.
And you've got everything ready. The car is packed, the dog's at daycare, and you really don't want to be the one who says, hey, sorry, I'm going to have to cancel this whole trip.
Right. There's a lot of pressure there to go.
Yeah, right. There is pressure to go. And luckily that we had perfect weather every single time. We usually didn't have enough wind. But as far as feeling safe, perfect weather each time. The fog was kind of crappy, but other than that, we had no trouble with weather at all. Each weekend we planned to go, we were able to. I was assuming, hey, one of those 4 weekends we're going to end up having to cancel due to weather, and we didn't. So we really lucked out. So I would say that was a really good first summer.
Right. So let me ask you a question. One of the things that is always a dilemma is what kind of tools, spare parts, what are the things that I know how to fix on the boat? What are the things that I'm leaving for other people to fix on the boat? How did you sort of address that and think that through?
Great. Yeah, that's thanks for reminding me. I wanted to talk about that. I have a lot of, as someone who came to sailing later, I don't, if you read even Cruising World's pretty nice introduction for people. It's pretty it's pretty glossy, the kind of charter company advertisements version of sailing, right? But if you read any of the books about it, it's all about seamanship. You need to be self-sufficient. You need to be able to repair everything yourself. You need to know your boat in and out, inside and out. And I think if anyone else is listening to this thinking about getting into it later in life, you might think, God, there's no way. And one of the ways is, well, sail on other people's boats. Like, I could be sailing on other people's boats for years to try to learn this stuff, when what I really want is my own. I knew I wanted my own boat, right? But how do you reconcile that you're going to have a new boat and you're not going to know it inside and out? You're not going to know how to fix everything yourself. One of the things I did was I took a diesel course in Newport at IRIS. I forget what it stands for, but it's I think it's like a maritime technician school, like electrical, mechanical, and stuff like that they teach, and they do courses for the public too. So I did diesel weekend. That was really, really helpful. And you learn how to change the oil, and you do it, right? They've got engines there. You change the oil, you bleed the fuel lines, you change a fuel filter, you check belt tension by feeling to get an idea of what that's supposed to be like. And you do a visual inspection. What is a belt supposed to look like? How do you know if it's starting to wear? I would say those things are things that you can learn pretty quickly, and you really should know how to do, especially changing fuel filters and having them on board, because your fuel filters could get clogged while you're underway. And so for me, I thought about what might I need to be able to do in an emergency, and what things are okay, this emergency could happen, but it's so extreme that I'm going to call the Coast Guard, and I'm not going to try to prepare for this. It's too much. unless I'm going to go offshore at some point and sail to Bermuda, and then maybe I'll make sure I can have a plan for that. And one of the things that's not going to, it's a maintenance thing for the boat. You're not going to have to do in an emergency. So if you needed to pay somebody else, you could. So in that latter category, things like winterization, you probably won't need to do emergency winterization unless you leave it too long, which I did last year, but I did find I was planning to do it myself, got overwhelmed by it, and then quickly managed to find somebody that was going to come and just winterize the boat for me. But yeah, if you plan ahead, it's not an emergency. They've got several weeks that they can do that. You're not going to have to do that on the water. Emergency oil change is pretty unlikely, but that's also pretty easy, right? I mean, I changed oil in my car. It's only a little different because you have to suck it out, and you need some special equipment to do that. But yeah, changing oil filter, not hard. Changing fuel filters and then bleeding the fuel lines, I actually haven't done that on my boat yet, but I'm going to when we launch in the spring before we go anywhere. And that's something that you could have to do in an emergency, so I do have spares. So I've got a spare primary and secondary filter. For the boat, I have a spare belt because the belt can break. That's something that you should have on board too. I have a spare oil filter, which, again, I don't see emergency oil filter change, but why not have that? So those are the main spares I have. Plus, I have bungs for through hulls. So if a seacock snaps off and you've got water coming into the boat, or a hose, or it's really only if the seacock breaks, because if it doesn't, you can turn the seacock off. Or if the seacock is seized up, I've got these conical shaped wooden plugs that you can buy at West Marine. I've heard the plastic ones work better. I might get those. Some people hang them on each through hull. I wanted to do that and I didn't bother. But I do have them. I do know where they are, and I probably don't have one in the size that I need. I'm assuming all of them aren't going to fail at once, right? Because I don't think I have an assortment of sizes, and probably I need 4 of the medium-sized ones, and I only have 1 or 2 of them.
Yes,
but I've got those ready to go to plug a hole. So that's kind of my emergency. Like checking the rig. I'm going to have someone do that because I haven't yet since I bought the boat. Even during the survey, I didn't have anyone go up the mast. Might you need to go up the mast in an emergency? I think probably not for me as a coastal sailor. I can probably get back to a dock and then see if I want to go up the mast to put a halyard back up there if it breaks. Otherwise, I'm motoring to the next port. If you're crossing the Atlantic, yes, you need to be able to do that, right? So that's sort of I kind of said, okay, calm down. There are boats everywhere when you're out. You're out during good weather. There's constant boats back and forth, even out in the middle of Cape Cod Bay. And Towboat US is nearby. So think about the things that you can just call to get somebody to help, and the stuff where, I'm going to need to be able to, I probably want to be able to do that myself, because even they could probably change a fuel filter, but they got to have the right one. So you should at least have it on board, right? So have those ready to go. So that's how I broke that down.
Yeah, excellent. So we've been chatting for almost an hour now, Charlie. So is there anything that you wanted to talk about or share with our listeners about the kind of your first season that I haven't asked you?
No, I think, if you've only sailed inshore and you think, sailing's too stressful to go on a farther trip.
Yes.
Do the farther trip, because it's probably less stressful than your afternoon day sailing. And the other thing is, kind of trust your. Oh, actually, you know what? I do have one last anecdote, and this is trusting yourself over things that old salts might tell you. And so I mentioned before, I have a dual rudder boat. There's some different things that are different about that than what you learn in all the sailing books. One of them is how to use a stopping spring. So I reasoned with the beam aft that I have, the wide back of the boat, that I could put a stopping spring on the stern cleat to swing the boat into the dock. And so I was doing that, and it worked pretty well. One day it was a bit windy off the dock, and it took a little longer to do that. And this older sailor walking down the dock said, "It's supposed to be from the midship cleat. That's why it won't work." And I thought, maybe he's right. It might work better. So I did that next time, and the bow crashed right into the dock, because The only reason it works on most boats is you turn the wheel away from the dock and use the prop wash to push the stern into the dock. Without that prop wash, the leverage you have pushes the bow straight into the dock uncontrollably. And if you have dual rudders, you have no prop wash. So it has to be on the stern cleat. So the way I was doing it was correct for my boat. And so sometimes, sometimes you have to trust yourself. And that was sort of a moment for me to realize, hey, I'm not just a rookie who doesn't know anything. Actually, I know my boat better than this guy who's been sailing for 40 years in this case.
Right. Yeah. This might not be a great analogy, but the advice you get, at the dock or in the bar is akin to the advice you get on social media, and it should be treated the same way.
Right. You've got to think, does this make sense?
Right.
And, is this maybe a boat design difference?
Right.
And in this case, it was, right? Dual rudders. I'm a fan. I think they handle really well, but they handle differently. I mean, it'll turn on a dime. It backs up really nicely. A lot of the things that are difficult about other boats are easy on that one. But if you're doing a maneuver where you need prop wash, it won't work. So you've got to do something else. Yeah.
Excellent. So last question. If someone's listening to this and they wanted to summarize the 3 takeaways that they learned from this, because they're going to tell their friend about it, what are the 3 takeaways that you have for our listeners?
Oh, you should have asked me that before we started. So yeah, I guess the 3 takeaways are, I think, hey, you can start sailing later in life and give yourself a chance to learn things. Be conservatively adventurous. That's number 1, right? Like, take it easy on yourself. Don't worry about if someone's going to say, why does that guy have 2 reefs in his mainsail? That's lame. Stop thinking about other people and do what's right for you and what you're comfortable with. I think that would be the number 1 thing. Number 2 thing is get out there and do it, right? And build on it. But if there's that thing you really want to do, go for it. We bought the boat partly to go to Provincetown and stay there for a week. So let's go do that. And the first time I was half thinking about canceling it, right? Because I was nervous. I'm glad I didn't. And gosh, I guess the third thing is all experiences are different, maybe. And so be concerned about, or just be aware of, if your boat design is different from the one in the sailing books, for example.
Right.
Or, something that worked well on your friend's boat, the way the sails balance, right? They've moved the position of the mast on boats over time. So whether you reef the jib first or the main can be different on each boat. And so you've got to experiment with that stuff. And we did experiment with reefing. And do those experiments when you don't have to, would be my advice too. That's part of being conservatively adventurous, is, getting to know some things. But it's also, don't think you have to figure out everything. Like, get a reasonable amount, but then just go.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Well, that's a great summary, Charlie. It was great chatting with you again. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Bela. Good to be here.
Bela, this was great. I mean, I haven't sailed that much, but the times that I have sailed, I could really relate to Charlie's experiences in terms of kind of being afraid of some of the stuff that's going on and having some anxiety and really having some less pleasant experiences until I got comfortable and kind of figured out how to cope with really, there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that are going on when you're sailing a boat. What were your key takeaways?
Yeah, so some of my key takeaways are, as with many things in life, you can read all the books you want, you can listen to all the podcasts you want, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, but at some point in time, if you're trying to learn a skill, you got to do it. You got to get out and you got to do it. And I think that's the same about sailing. The only way you're going to learn how to sail is to experience sailing. The only way you're going to get to know your boat is actually get out on your boat and have something break and then have to fix it. So I think, as with many things, you gotta go dive in and try it. And, that brings up a little anxiety, which we'll talk about in a second here. But I think it's just something that's required. So that was number 1. And I think Charlie was a good example of that. And as you do that, it builds confidence. I think about myself, like, I wanted to go out solo sailing on my boat. I wanted to be able to dock it solo. I wanted to be able to go out and sail it by myself. And, you know, the first couple times I did that, I took someone with me. In this case, it was my son. And I said, don't do anything. You're just here in case something goes wrong. So if I need you, I want you ready, but I don't want you to do anything. So I pulled away from the dock myself. I went out and sailed. I hoisted the sails. I did all the stuff. I came back and I docked the boat by myself. Now, I had thought through all of those things in advance. So I had a plan for how to leave the dock by myself. I had a plan for how to bring the boat back to the dock by myself. But I had that kind of safety valve there because my appetite for risk is not super large. So I had that safety valve there. That helped me build my confidence. So I said, hey, yeah, I can do this by myself. And then after that, you know, it was all great. So a lot of this is all related, right? It's related to your appetite for risk. How much are you willing to sort of try on your own? How much are you willing to try and learn each time? But, you know, I think about it from the perspective of every time we do something new, we learn. And oftentimes when we repeat things, we learn as well. So that to me is the major one of the major takeaways in my conversation with Charlie.
Yeah, agreed with all those. Good, really good key points, Bela. I mean, and from my side, I just loved how honest Charlie was about dealing with his anxiety. And I mean, I think I've talked about this a few times, as I struggle with anxiety on occasion too. I think like a lot of us. And you know, what Charlie was talking about, I think, especially for people who are new to sailing, are issues that almost everybody feels. But for a variety of reasons, I think not everybody is comfortable talking about their anxieties with anything like Charlie was. You know, and again, while simply talking about one's anxieties, I feel this way, you know, this made me scared, this made me nervous, this made me anxious, this made me uncomfortable. I think that can help them make anxieties a bit better in some people's cases. But what was really cool was how Charlie turned his anxieties into specific strategies, right? What do I need to learn? What type of spare equipment do I need to have on board of the boat? What types of fixes, repairs, changes, maintenance do I need to know how to do on the boat to make sure that I'm comfortable with most situations that I would encounter? And what's the mental preparation that I need to, you know, not only make him or anybody else dealing with this safer on the boat, but reduce the anxieties and have a nicer time on the boat? Because after all, that's really why you buy a boat, right? Is to enjoy your time on it, right? And you know, you've talked about some of your sailing anxieties, both in the interview and in previous episodes. And I think, you know, so I think you've been really open about it too, and the things that make you nervous and how you've dealt with that. Anything to add from your side on this topic?
Well, you know, as I was chatting with Charlie and listening to you talk about listening to the conversation, for the most part, I internalize my anxieties. I don't have conversations about them, but at the same time, I'm very much like Charlie in that I think through what can I do to help alleviate that anxiety. And the example I just gave about docking the boat and going out sailing by myself was a way of doing it. It was like, there's no way I'm taking this boat out totally by myself. So how can I get myself there sort of comfortably with, and you know, in my own mind, I worked it out of having someone else there, but I'm going to do everything. So it's very similar to what Charlie was talking about, but just sort of different topics. And so that's sort of how I deal with it. I try to solve the, either if the anxiety is such for me that I'm not sure I can figure out how to deal with it, or how to, I'll maybe use the word conquer or overcome it. I don't think you ever conquer it, but over manage it. There's the word I'm looking for. How I can manage the anxiety. If I can't figure out how to do that, then chances are I'm not going to do it. Plain and simple, right? Because for example, we've talked about this. I don't like anchoring out. I have anchor anxiety. And I've tried bigger anchors. I've tried longer chains. I've tried all sorts of stuff. I still don't sleep when I'm at anchor. And you know what? That's it. I don't anchor out. And maybe that's being a wimp from a sailing perspective. But it is what it is. Now, if I have to anchor out, I will. But if I have a choice, I'll do things that I can avoid that anxiety. So that's sort of how I deal with it. I internalize it, and then I figure out strategies of avoiding it or figuring out how to manage it.
Yeah. And that really echoes, I think, Charlie's last point, which I thought was really cool about just trusting yourself. Right. And I mean, I think he meant it in one way, right? Trust yourself that you can overcome it. But on the other side, knowing yourself well enough to know, you know what, there's just really not, I tried a bunch of different things and there's really not much I can do. That's okay too. You know,
Right.
That's okay too.
That's right. I've gotten comfortable with that in my life.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay.
Yeah. And that's okay. You don't need to be awesome at everything, you know?
That's
either.
right.
So there's some interesting ways to look at this. And I think these have all been really good kind of nuggets of wisdom for sailing, but really, I think these are applicable to anything in life, right? Anything that you enjoy doing, but has some things that are maybe a little bit nerve-wracking about it, right? How to approach those and how to think through those and how to strategize and how to reduce those anxieties. And, you know, right, whether it's driving a car in traffic or whether it's flying or whether it's, you know what I mean, right, being in a small space or something like that, the same logic applies. But at the end of the day, when you try everything, and like you and anchoring, if you know it's just not your thing, that's okay too, you know?
Right. Yeah, I'm happy to drop anchor at lunchtime. I'm very comfortable doing that while I'm awake. All right. I'll spend all day at anchor, but when I'm asleep, I don't want to be at anchor. And you reminded me of something I've said many times. There are a bunch of things I do in my life that I do to relieve tension or relieve anxiety, not cause tension. So when that activity starts causing tension, I either need to figure out what's changed, what's going on, or quite frankly, I stop doing it because in some things you have that choice. You don't have that choice in everything in life, but in these elective things that I do in my life.
Hobbies are elective.
Yes,
exactly. A hobby is a choice. Right.
Yes, I have that choice. So if it's not working, I just stop doing it. So there you go.
Love it.
Time to wrap this one up, Mike.
Sure. Listeners, thanks for joining us yet again for another episode. We hope you found our conversation with Charlie interesting and thought-provoking, just like we did. To contact us, please feel free to send us an email at sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that like button on your podcasting application. And you can now also find the podcast on YouTube. If you know of someone that would make a good guest for the show, let us know. That's it for today's episode. Hope to see you out there on the water soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And over here from Münster, Germany, thanks for listening and see everybody next time.